Hello everybody and welcome to another episode of Box Office Talk. This is the show where I break down what happened at the box office, see if my predictions for the top 5 are correct, then make predictions for next week's top 5. So let's get right on into it. Last week I predicted the number 1 would be Aquaman and the Lost Kingdom, number 2 would be Wonka, number 3 would be Migration, number 4 would be Anyone But You, and number 5 would be Poor Things. And I was so very close. I got 4 out of 5 of my predictions right for this weekend. There was only one movie that it's another one of those that you never heard of before, sneaking into the top 5. How could you possibly predict it? So of course nobody got their predictions right because nobody saw this movie coming. So sorry. I'm not perfect. I don't know which of these movies sometimes that you see on Fandango randomly are gonna hit or make enough to get into the top 5, but you know, good enough that they have a fan base. Obviously, let's go over the numbers. And of course, because it is Christmas Day. Merry Christmas. I am recording this late on Christmas Day. If I wasn't so busy last night, I would have had this out on Sunday, but obviously that is not the case. There might be some numbers that dip into the more 4-day weekend. I'm going to try, obviously you will hear what happened on the 3-day, but there might be some numbers that have come in estimating how much it's going to make today for the 4-day weekend. Either way, you're going to get some numbers. So let's dive right on into it. Number 1 was, of course, Aquaman and the Lost Kingdom. You know, not unusual for a superhero film to get number 1. It's been happening this entire year for every superhero film, but I think this movie will definitely follow in the tradition next weekend of dipping or not having, maybe, let me reiterate, probably not having as great of staying power because next weekend is going to be dry. There's really no new releases except for what's been released on Christmas Day today that wasn't released on Friday. So that would be Ferrari, The Color Purple, and The Boys in the Boat. That's the other one. So those 3 didn't release on this past Friday. They just released officially today. So those are technically the new releases, but you know, because they're now out, it's kind of like, it's going to be a pretty dry weekend. We'll talk about it when we get to it later. So Aquaman will probably have a chance to hold over a little better than some of these other recent superhero flops, especially in the DC universe. But I still don't really think this opening is really helping. It made $27 million for the 3-day opening weekend, and the 4-day estimate has it opening with $40 million in a domestic total. This is, of course, on a budget of $205 million to $215 million. That's where Wikipedia kind of has it. And of course, because it is a superhero film, because there were some reshoots and some test screenings that didn't go well, you know, many cuts, some cameos that were planned that are no longer here, this number could be potentially higher. as we usually discuss with other superhero films worldwide, its total is sitting at $120 million. So definitely a slightly higher debut than some of the other DC films that we've gotten. Like, for example, it is $8 million away from outgrossing the entire worldwide run of Blue Beetle. So it has a chance to at least get past its initial production budget. I don't really know about doubling it. It's definitely not going to get near the $1 billion success that was the first Aquaman. You know, compare this to the first Aquaman. It's dead in the water. You know what I mean? Like, that sucks. Now, of course, like I said, because it's going to be pretty dry next week, who knows how these things go. It could potentially hold over and, you know, just be a moderate hit. But I think in comparison with the first Aquaman, that's still bad. And also the fact that they've already promoted, this is the end, this is Aquaman's last stand, but Jason Momoa will still have a place in the DC universe that James Gunn and Peter Safran crap. It's kind of like, it doesn't really matter at this point. You've already kind of built this as like, it's the last one, and it's in a universe that people have kind of, you know, varying interest in, and this is only the second Aquaman movie, and sure, the first one made $1 billion, but if the second Aquaman movie is kind of getting worse reviews than the first movie, and people who have seen it, maybe if they like it, the only thing that they can really say is like, well, you know, it's a little messy, it's you know, not perfect, but it's fun. No, I don't think that's winning anybody over. It's just not looking great, but you know, have solace in the fact that this is the last one in this DC continuity, and you know, it just is the kind of period on the 2023 superhero movie year. You know, maybe we can rebound next year with the only, what is it, only two main ones, I guess, with the Joker 2 and Deadpool 3. You're gonna have your Madam Webs and Cravens as well, so we'll see how it all goes in the long run. But what an abysmal year for superhero films. I'm not expecting this to have as big a drop off as like the Marvels, for example, but it's probably not going to be good next week, which will say a lot as well, since, like I said, it's going to be pretty dry. Anyways, let's go over some other stats for I mentioned the worldwide numbers for DC. It's about to outgross Blue Beetle, so there you go. But domestically, it is 6 million away from outgrossing Wonder Woman 1984, which was, of course, the COVID domestic release, so, some wiggle room there as far as how well it's doing. For the DC Universe, it has an opening weekend 2 million higher than Blue Beetle, but it's 3 million below Shazam 2 and 40 million below the original, just to show where it is compared to the first movie, and also just with the recent DC films, it's right there in the middle. For James Wan, it is 9 million above the opening weekend for Saw, but 13 million below The Conjuring 2 and Insidious 2, so this isn't even, as far as James Wan's films, you would expect, yeah, of course, the sequel to his billion-dollar maker is going to is going to be like one of his highest opening weekends. It's going to outgross all these movies, but right now it's right there with kind of some of his earlier work, and this is not to diss on the quality of those movies. I'm just saying that's not where Aquaman 2 would have been, or it would have been projected to be, if you were going to say this like right after the first movie came out. Different times, man, different times. As far as his filmography and what it is outgrossed domestically, it is already 31 million over Death Sentence, 24 million over Dead Silence, and 27 million over Malignant, and needs 14 million until it outgrosses Insidious. And then for the worldwide James Wan numbers, prepare for some familiar ones and some other ones I haven't mentioned yet. It is 87 million over Malignant, 21 million over Insidious, 104 million over Death Sentence, 100 million over Dead Silence, and 17 million over Saw. It needs 41 million now until it outgrosses Insidious Chapter 2. So yeah, for James Wan, obviously it's going to make more than some of these other James Wan films. James Wan is at a varying career as far as like some of his earlier work, made money, or it was successful for what it was, but, it's not the highest grossing films. And then all of a sudden he has Aquaman or Furious 7 or the Conjuring movies kind of really took off. So this movie worldwide, at least, is kind of in the middle of that. Like I said, for James Wan personally, he did his job. He made another one of these movies. He's got a big horror deal with Blumhouse going on. He's got Night Swim right around the corner. So he's not in deep water or anything like that. And no one in the DC universe is really at this point, because this is, like I said, it's been promoted as like the last one for this continuity. So, and they're starting fresh. So it doesn't matter. None of this matters. Let's move on to number 2, which is Wonka, making 18 million for the 3-day weekend, adding to a domestic total of 85 million. So that places it 120 million away from the Johnny Depp one. For Paul King, it has outgrossed Paddington 2 domestically by 45 million, and it has also outgrossed the first Paddington by 9 million. So it has really risen in the ranks there. Worldwide, it really bumped up too. It is sitting at $256 million. So not only is it already over Paddington 2's worldwide run by 64 million, and it also has outgrossed Paddington 1 by 4 million, and it's behind the Johnny Depp Wonka by 219 million now. So, inching along when it comes to that movie, but more importantly, for its, listed $125 million budget, it has officially doubled that number, and will probably, because it's doing so well, and because next weekend is so dry, it will probably have some repeat business, some word of mouth spread, and it is looking like it can, triple that budget, get to 375 million worldwide, and it's already there, which would be spectacular. Like I've been saying, I don't expect this to be the Aquaman or the Avatar 2 of the holiday season. It's probably going to end up more so like the Puss in Boots, which we got last year, where it opened pretty, or that movie opened pretty small, but it went on to make almost like $500 million worldwide. And this one, is probably looking realistically to get around there, which is very exciting. And we'll talk a little bit more about that when we get to the predictions for next weekend. Number 3 is Migration, which is of course the new Illumination film that nobody is interested in, oddly enough. So it opened for the 3-day weekend. It opened to $12 million, which is 10 million below Sing 2's opening weekend for Illumination. Obviously that came out in 2021, so some people are still anxious about COVID and people are still masking up. We're kind of in that transitional period of like, we're trying to get people back into the theater. Spider-Man No Way Home just came out, so this is the other option for people to see. So yeah, that one's gonna be pretty low. So to make an opening weekend lower than Sing 2 is pretty bad. In fact, it is the lowest opening weekend for Illumination domestically, which is crazy. It is 91 million behind the run for Hop. Worldwide, it is sitting at only 39 million right now, and needs 149 million until it outgrosses Hop. So it is way behind Illumination's arguably worst and also historically lowest grossing film. So now, of course, Sing back in 2016, that was one that it came out in December and people were like, okay, yeah. And it kind of had a lukewarm kind of box office opening. And that kind of went on, it never hit number one, I believe, at the box office, but that kind of went on to be a solid hit for Illumination. It had strong word of mouth. A Wonka, if you will, a Puss in Boots, if you will. So Migration, I guess you could say, has a chance to do a little bit of that business. But honestly, I haven't heard anything about it. This movie is technically out, and I have not heard anything about this movie critically. Like, I don't know what people have said about it on Rotten Tomatoes or just early reactions. I don't know diddly squat about this movie. I don't know if kids are responding to it. I don't know if kids, responded to the marketing beforehand. It's just a new Illumination film, and for the first time ever, I don't know what people think about it, which is kind of crazy. So there you go. So it has a chance, obviously, for the holiday season, and it'll make some money. Like I said, next weekend's going to be very dry. I keep saying that, but god damn, it needs a lot to double this $72 million budget, it's low enough where they could, if they do manage to have some solid staying power in the next couple weeks, but they really need it. Anyways, let's move on to number 4, which is Anyone But You. This one, I think, has a little bit more of a chance. But I don't know, man. Let's go over it. It made $6 million for the 3-day weekend, which is on a budget of $25 million. And there's no worldwide total yet. This movie takes place in Australia, so maybe that'll be incentive for some worldwide audiences. Like, oh, takes place in Australia, which is where I'm from, something like that. Or maybe just the name, like people maybe recognize Glenn Powell because he was in that worldwide hit Top Gun Maverick. I don't know, but either way, they're going to need some help as well. So hope, but the budget is lower than something like Migration, but $6 million is lower than the opening of $12 million, and at least Migration has a worldwide total right now. This movie's, Anyone But You is a solid little rom-com, so it would suck if it flopped, because I think my biggest thing is, like, it's just great that this is in a theater, because Glenn Powell's last rom-com with Zoe Deutsch was a Netflix original, and, I also thought that was a pretty solid movie. I enjoyed it by the end, and it probably would have been a big hit back in the day when you released rom-coms in theaters, and I was really hoping that this one could maybe rejuvenate some of that fan base, so hopefully that can be something that comes back later on in its coming weeks, but we will see. For Will Gluck, the director, it is $1 million over the Fired Up opening weekend for him, so there you go. It is also $11 million away from outgrossing that one. Right now it's his lowest one. It is his second lowest opening weekend for Will Gluck, like I just said, Fired Up being his first film and also his lowest, so yeah, it just has a ways to go before it makes any real impact. But maybe some people have enjoyed it enough where they're saying, like, it's a solid, entertaining movie to go see this holiday season, Anyone But You. But I don't know who's saying that. Number 5 is the movie that came out of nowhere, Salar Part 1 Ceasefire, making $5.4 million. This is on a budget of 270 crore, and like so many of this, I don't know if 5.4 is good. For this budget, but it snuck into the top 5, which has got to mean something. Let's move on to number 6 though, which is The Iron Claw, which is a little interesting. I do wonder if this one could be like a potential surprise as the weeks go by, because it made $4.8 million this weekend, and this is on a budget of 15.9. So I'm sure it doesn't sound that great right now, but I feel like there's been just a little bit of murmurs about how great this movie is, and like, have you seen The Iron Claw? Hearing all these things about it, the real life story or just the movie itself. So I'm wondering if this potentially has a chance to stick around a little bit more and kind of garner enough attention where they could potentially double this budget. For Sean Durkin, the director, this is already his highest grossing theatrical release, so congratulations. That's both domestically and worldwide, obviously, even though this movie doesn't have a worldwide total right now. But still, like, I don't know, like, I wouldn't be surprised if that's the case, but also this could just be one of those things where it's like, well, it's too busy, too crowded a movie season, gotta make time for Aquaman 2. We'll see, though. Number 7 is The Boy and the Heron, making $3.1 million, adding to a domestic total of $30 million. Worldwide, it is sitting at $108 million, so it is now 9 million off from The Wind Rises. So it's still slowly inching up through the Hayao Miyazaki filmography. Domestically, though, it's already his highest grossing film, which is a pretty great achievement. It's not like it has to break every other record out there, but, you know, it's still inching along, which is pretty solid. Number 8 is The Hunger Games: The Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes, making 3.04 million, adding to a domestic total of 153 million. So it's 128 million now for Mockingjay Part 2, and worldwide, now that it's sitting at $303 million, it is 343 million away from Mockingjay Part 2. So, like I've been saying, there's kind of been, you know, what's the budget? Is it 100 million? I saw some things saying it was 130. So if you do subscribe to the fact that the movie cost 100 million, it has technically tripled it by this point. If you think it's $130 billion budget, it's not just 100. Well, you know, it's made 43 million over the doubling point, so it's probably fine either way. You know what I mean? This movie's been popular enough and has been holding over pretty well. It's kind of surprising to see it dip down this low now, but I mean, not really, because it's been out for a while and you have these new releases and Wonka's holding over pretty well. But still, though, it's had a pretty solid run all around. So this is pretty great. Number 9 is Godzilla -1, making 2.7 million, adding to a domestic total of 40 million. Worldwide, it is sitting at $63 million. So that is great for this movie. They announced a black and white version of this, which will that's probably going to be interesting to see when that comes. So if that gets as wide a release, is it coming to theaters? Wait a minute, I actually don't know that. Should I look it up? Nah, I'll leave it in the video. Sorry, guys. And finally, closing out the video, Dunkey, another one, coming out of nowhere. Don't know what this movie is. Made 2.6 million, adding to a domestic total of 4.6 million. And this is on a budget of 120 crore. So bada bing, bada boom. There you go. That is our top 10 for the 3-day Christmas season. Now it's time for the fun part, the predictions for next week's top 5. Now, sometimes I will go the easy route and say, like, well, it's probably going to be the exact same because nothing. But technically, there is something new because it's just out on Christmas Day right now. And it'll be out for next weekend, which is going to be pretty dry as hell. Obviously, I don't expect, like, huge upticks, but we'll talk about it. So, number 1, I'm not actually going to predict it to be Aquaman 2. I think it will dip down just enough, and Wonka's already kind of riding it pretty close right now. I think number 1 will be Wonka. I think this will be the weekend where it overtakes it, and if it's not, okay, I'm just trying to make a fun prediction. But number 2, I do think will be Aquaman and the Lost King. I don't think it's going, like I've been saying, I don't think it'll drop as historically low as the Marvels or The Flash or Shazam. But I do think this one will not have as great a word of mouth, especially as we exit the holiday season. Number 3, though, trying to be diplomatic, not sure where it'll be because, you know, it's not really marketing that it is a full-blown Broadway musical. They've been trying to include hints. I don't know how many people really know. Like, I feel like some people just assume, like, oh, it's just a remake of The Color Purple, but it's Broadway musical. So I think number 3 will be The Color Purple. I don't think it'll be, like, the big holiday hit, but I think it could potentially make enough to squeak in right here. Number 4, I think, will be Migration, and number 5, Anyone But You. I don't think The Boys in the Boat or Ferrari will have that much of a audience drive for those ones. Anyways, what are your predictions for next week's top 5? Leave them in the comments below, and as always, thank you guys for watching. Make sure to subscribe. I'm Jackson Fulcher. See you guys next time.